A lot of features you might want to add to your Discord bot are going to require a database. The database that I prefer to use is called MongoDB, and in this video, I'm going to show you how you can create your own Mongo server and how you can connect your Discord bot to that server. If you want to see more tutorials like this one, then be sure to subscribe to the channel. So before we connect our bot to our server, we have to actually create our own server. You can head over to mongodb.com. A link will be in the description. Once you're here, you can click on try for free. And then at this stage, you want to select Atlas and then fill in all this information and then also confirm your email. Once you've made your account, you should see a screen like this. And we want to go ahead and click on build a database right here. And then we want to select the shared option, which is free. As your bot scales, or if you already have a large bot, you might be more interested in these other options. But for most people who are just starting off, you obviously just want to start with the free tier. So I'll click on this and then I'll click on create. And then I'm going to keep most of these things the default. And then I'm going to go ahead and click on create cluster right here. So after waiting a couple minutes, the process is now done. We can go over to connect. Now, typically I just allow access from anywhere because it's the easiest method. But if you want extra security, you can add in your own IP address as well as the IP addresses of the machines that you're using to host your bot. But for this tutorial, I'm just going to select access from anywhere. We can then click on add IP address. And now we can create a database user. In this case, I'm going to make my username Alex, and then you can auto generate a secure password here. And you can also show this and you can see it changes every single time. So once you have these two things set, you can create a database user, and then we can select a connection method. You want to select connect to your application. And now here we have this connection string, which is how we're going to actually connect to the bot. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this, and then I'm going to go over to my bot in VS Code. And I'm going to show you two ways to connect. The first way is how you're going to connect to any Discord bot. And the second way is going to be a simpler way if you are using the Warnoff Keys commands command handler. So either way, let's go ahead and open up our terminal. Navigate to the correct folder if you need to. In order to install Mongoose, you can type into your console npm install mongoose at latest. This at latest part is important because this will determine how you're going to actually configure Mongoose. So make sure you're installing the latest version. I can now import Mongoose near the top of my file. So import Mongoose from Mongoose. And if you are using JavaScript, you would import this with const mongoose equals require mongoose. So pretty standard import statements here. Again, this is TypeScript and this will be JavaScript. So now within our client ready callback, I'm going to go ahead and say await mongoose.connect. And we're going to pass in a string here as well as an object. Now, because we are using await, this callback function needs to be asynchronous. And this string here is where we can paste in our connection string. And typically, you won't want to store your connection strings directly in your code because oftentimes you'll be committing this code to GitHub and this has your password right here. So you're going to either want to save this entire string inside of an external JSON file or a .env file. I'm going to show you how to set up a .env file. It's actually very simple. So I'm going to open up my terminal again, and then I can say npm install .env. Now the next step is to import and run .env. Within TypeScript, it will be this line here, where we're importing .env/config. Within JavaScript, that would be require .env, and then we can call the config method. So again, this is TypeScript, this is JavaScript. Now that we have access to that, we want to create a .env file within your project directory. I already have mine here, which will hold my token here in a moment. But we also want to add in our Mongo connection URI. So I can paste this in here, and you want to replace the password string, including the less than and greater than signs with your actual password. So for example, if your password was ABC123, it would look like this. Now I'm going to go ahead and do this off camera here in a moment, but for now, go ahead and save that. And then going back into your main file, you can replace this entire string with process.env.mongo_URI. This entire string right here has to exactly match what you added in right here. And this also is going to have an error here if you're using TypeScript because it doesn't know if this actually exists. So if you are using TypeScript, you can simply say or an empty string. Now within these objects here, you want to say keep alive is true. This way you only have to create one MongoDB connection, and the connection will stay alive as long as your bot is open. So therefore you can keep on using MongoDB with all of your features and your commands. So I'm going to run my bot now with npm run dev. And if everything connected correctly, we shouldn't see any errors. And everything seems fine here. All of these are from one-off-keys commands directly, but everything should be connected to our Mongo server. I'm going to now show you how you can connect using the one-off-keys commands command handler, and then after that, we'll actually try and write something to our Mongo database. So I'm going to stop my bot, and I'm going to comment this code out here. And assuming you're already using one-off-keys commands, you might see something like this. We just want to add in another property here, such as Mongo URI. We can then pass in process.env.mongo URI. Behind the scenes, it'll go ahead and create a connection for us here. Now, if you know you want to add in other options into this object right here when connecting, you can actually pass those in directly to one-off-keys commands. So going back down, we can say db options as an object. And this object here will be added in to this object right here. So for example, if we wanted to simulate keep alive as true, which is there by default, but hypothetically, if we wanted to simulate that, we can say keep alive is true. We can add in whatever other options we want as well. But again, by default, this is the only option there is. So if you're just adding that, then db options isn't necessary. So now I'm going to go ahead and make sure that everything is working when it comes to writing things to the database. And if you connected using the Mongo URI on one-off-keys commands, then you likely already see some data in the database. Now, just a warning, the MongoDB website doesn't have a dark mode. So if you're in a dark room, then watch your eyes. So if I go over here, we can go to Browse Collections. And here we see My First Database, which if you look at your connection URI, that's actually the default database that's going to be created. And below this, we see a lot of different collections that are all created from one-off-keys commands. So behind the scenes, there's language selections, there's per guild prefixes, there's certain required commands, there's cooldowns, and so it uses the Mongo connection in order to use these features. So now let's go ahead and create our own collection and write to the database. And this will be a very basic example. And if you want to learn more about MongoDB, I do have an entire playlist linked down in the description or at the top right of your screen now. Let's go back over to VS Code, and I'm going to make a new file. This will be called test-schema.ts. And if you're using JavaScript, then of course you would use JS instead. Within here, we're first looking to import Mongoose. Within TypeScript, that would be import Mongoose from Mongoose. And within JavaScript, that would be const Mongoose equals require Mongoose. So now I can go ahead and create my schema. I can say const schema equals new mongoose.schema with a capital S. Obviously, this is a constructor because the new keyword. So we can add in parentheses here, and then we can pass in our own object. Now a schema is basically the blueprint of how our data should be structured. And MongoDB is a NoSQL database, which means there isn't a lot of strict rules on how your data can be structured. But using Mongoose, this provides us with the ability to create some blueprints or some templates for how our data should be structured. That way it will complain to us if we're not following the rules that we set for ourselves. So within this, I'm going to go ahead and create a message. I'm going to make this an object. We can say the type is string and required is true. Now I'm going to go ahead and export this within TypeScript. That would be export default mongoose.model. This is a function call. We'll then pass in the name of the model. In this case, I'm going to call it testing. And then afterwards, we can pass in our schema. Now within JavaScript, it's very similar. We can say module.exports equals, and then the same exact code right here. So I'm going to copy and paste this here. And then I'm going to comment this out because I'm using TypeScript. So I can save this, and going into index.ts, I can then import this near the top. So I can say import test schema from, and then the local file of test schema. And of course, if you're using JavaScript, that would be const test schema equals require, and then the local test schema file. So scrolling down, after you've created your connection, or after you've created your one-off-keys commands connector, we're going to want to use the schema to write something to the database. Now, because this is not asynchronous code here, I'm wanting to wait 1 second before I actually do anything. This is just for this tutorial, and you normally wouldn't do it this way. So after this, I'm going to say set timeout. Here we're going to have a callback function, and we're going to specify 1000, which is 1 second. Now I can make this function asynchronous, and within this function callback, I'm going to say await new test schema. We can then add in our own object. And at the very end of this line, we can say .save as a function call. Now within here, we have to specify the data that we saved to our database. So going into test schema, we see this message, which is a required string. So this message here can be hello world. And if I save this and I run the bot with npm run dev, the bot starts up and now everything seems to be working because there were no errors. If I go over to Mongo and then I click on refresh at the top right here, we now see testings. And if I click on it, we see the message is hello world. Now an S is always going to be added to things because it wants everything to be plural. To fix this, you can go to your test schema and you can just simply add in the same name again right here. So I'll add this in here as well for the YouTube members and patrons to download the source code. And I want to go back and make sure that this still works when using one-off keys commands. So if I comment this out and I uncomment this, I can now change this to hello world with 2 exclamation points. And if I save it, it'll restart the bot. It'll then use the connection through one-off keys commands, and it'll then create a new entry into your database. So going back, again, watch your eyes. We still see the original hello world from the testings collection, but we now see the testing collection without the S. So if I click on this, we now see hello world with 2 exclamation points. Now, if you see multiple entries here, that's fine. That's probably just because your bot restarted multiple times. So each time your bot restarts, a new entry will be added because of this line right here. And again, this is obviously a very basic example just to make sure that everything is working. And if you want to learn more about MongoDB, I do have an entire playlist linked down below in the description. Thanks for watching the video. If you want to download the source code, gain early access to new videos, as well as get your own Linux VPS, then consider becoming a YouTube member by clicking on the join button directly below this video.